Coverage of the conflict in Libya has been decidedly one-sided in this country in favor of the rebels attempting to overthrow the government led by Colonel Muammar Gaddafi. Even though a so-called dignity delegation led by former Green Party presidential candidate and former Congressmember Cynthia McKinney has been in Libya for more than 6 days, there has been no attention paid to its reports, including bombs which threatened the delegation itself. Quote, "The bombing yesterday started at 11 a.m. and went nonstop until we went to sleep around 11:30 p.m., and we counted 89 blasts in the Tripoli area," McKinney wrote in an email Wednesday. Dedon Kamathi was a member of the Dignity delegation. He is a former Southern California Black Panther Party member and a community activist who now hosts the program Freedom Now on Pacifica radio station KPFK in Los Angeles.
We were part of a fact-finding mission to determine, I guess, a number of things. One, was there, according to the Western media, there was no support of Brother Gaddafi throughout Libya. That, in fact, they portrayed as this mad dictator that has brutally oppressed 6 million people in Libya. And we wanted to address that issue among other issues. So because of the NATO UN no-fly zone, we had to fly to Tunis and then to Jerba and drive from Jerba throughout the western region to Tripoli. And what we observed there was three phenomena. One, every 5 miles, there were military checkpoints checking by the Libyan government under Gaddafi, checking people going back and forth to make sure, I guess, they were not carrying weapons and so forth for rebels. Number two, we've observed popular, spontaneous young people waving green flags and holding up pictures of Gaddafi among what appeared to be junior high school or high school kids. And actually, one of them gave me a picture, and you see be great support. And the whole drive to Tripoli, which is about a 3-4 hour drive, we saw green flags, which are the flags of the Jamahdiya of the Libyan government under Gaddafi. I didn't see one red, black, and green flag of the King Idris period. The other observation was severe gas shortages with, quarter-mile gas lines, people waiting for gas. So that's what we observed driving from the Tunisian border to Tripoli. I guess the third was a large contingent of Africans that appeared to be coming from the east, going into Tunisia as refugees. And these were the darker-skinned Africans. And we actually talked a couple of points to some, and they were from, Ghana, Mali, Senegal, and they were running for their lives because, as is well published in the Western media, that they've been jacketed as mercenaries. So Libya has had over 2 million foreign workers in the country, and it was provided economic opportunities, both Egyptians in Libya as well as West Africans in Libya. But because this so-called rebel force, this transitional government, has pretty much declared war on black folks, dark-skinned black folks, that not only these refugees coming from the eastern region where they had jobs and families that saw children as young as 5 and 6 and 7 fleeing, but even we talked to some black Libyans, and they said that they were fearful. They came into Tripoli because of this kind of racial antagonism. In fact, one of my comrades, Dr. Wayne Short, talked to a member of the opposition, the rebel groups, and he asked him a point-blank question: "Can you guarantee my safety in Benghazi?" And the representative of the rebel forces, "No, we can't, because it's a massacre of a dark-skinned of Africans, and how you determine who's a Libyan versus a West African, they don't care. They just declared war." And I think it's part of this whole anti-African tendency that is a reaction to the Jamahdiya under the leadership of Colonel Gaddafi declaring publicly that Libya is part of Africa, and it relates to the African Union and to the struggles of African people, and that the Jamahdiya under Gaddafi is billions of dollars in support of the liberation movements, of the anti-neocolonial movements, of the anti-imperialist movements, as well as establishing much-needed infrastructural developments throughout Africa, as well as in the United States. We all know from the AAPRP or the Nation of Islam or the American Indian Movement, so many, that the Jamahiriya and Brother Gaddafi has supported the struggle against imperialism and colonialism. In fact, I remember vividly a lot of pressure was put by the U.S. government to have Mandela condemn Brother Gaddafi, but Mandela refused to do that because Libya provided material and political support for the liberation movement in Southern Africa, much the same as he'd done for the Palestinians and other oppressed people throughout the world.
Brother Kamathi, in one of her emails, Cynthia McKinney said that your delegation came under attack from the NATO force. Was your delegation attacked, or did you witness an attack by the NATO forces on the Libyan loyalist forces?
Yeah, well, what occurred is that at Bab el Azir, which is a large compound, in the evenings, there's mass spontaneous rallies by the people of Tripoli in support of Colonel Gaddafi's leadership. And 2 days, we went to the rally, actually supposed to speak there, but then we had to go and had to speak on national television to give a critical analysis of the contradictions of NATO. But the rally we attended at night, the following day, that whole compound was bombed. And it's frightening because we'd actually talked about going back the following day to the compound. That was our plans. And it was bombed the next day. And so, of course, if we had gone back, we'd been dead. And, of course, being in Tripoli, we're here, though the city is functioning in terms of transportation, people working, going to school, and so forth. We hear at nighttime the bombing. Though what's interesting is that typically they bomb at the nighttime, but in terms of this particular compound, they bombed in the daytime. So we found that quite, and to be honest with you, the whole time driving there was kind of like we all knew and we all kind of had to decide this. I wrote a last will and testament before I left for my children and so forth, because I didn't know if I was going to come back in one piece because of the NATO trying to, especially NATO is nothing but the former colonial powers of Africa, the European colonial powers of Africa and the United States trying to recolonize Africa, targeting the most virulent anti-imperialist government, which is Libya. Yes, that's what happened. Those are the facts.
Now, there have been reports here that we've received that Colonel Gaddafi was using now rape as a weapon in his suppression of his people, and in fact was passing out Viagra and other medical sex drugs to his troops in order to affect them to be able to carry out these rapes. Is that an urban legend or an urban myth, or is that perhaps a true tale that has emerged from what's going on there in Libya?
Well, because of as I mentioned earlier, the constant roadblocks by the military, and we must have come across at least 20 of them. We came across, of course, in 20 set of different military men, and they were all totally operating in a professional military disciplined manner. They were facilitating refugees from West Africa, from other areas of Africa, transition to Tunisia, and nowhere did they see any kind of undisciplined behavior by the military 4 to 5 hours of driving from Tunisia to Tripoli. And then once in Tripoli, there was military security throughout Tripoli. And once again, I didn't see no drinking, no wild behavior, no aggression against women. In fact, women were able to freely move throughout the city without operating and, with men protecting them from rapist troops. I can't speak from Benghazi because I didn't go to Benghazi, but I think that falls into what they call coded stereotype words to help deny the legitimacy of the Jamahiriya and the Libyan government. Libya, once again, as I'll reaffirm it, has the most advanced status of women throughout Africa. In fact, according to many United Nations indicators. If you look at education, if you look at housing, access to food, social service programs, Libya ranks number one of the 53 countries in Africa, number one by any objective United Nations social indicator statistics, whether it's UNESCO or whatever. This is something anybody can Google to verify. So I find it quite amazing that we look at Tunisia and Libya or Yemen, which are some of the highest rates of unemployment, lack of housing, no medical care, and so forth, and the United States supported those dictatorial regimes, yet government that has the best quality of life indicators by objective United Nations indicators is targeted for regime change. And so that tells me a whole lot how the multinational corporations and the neoliberal agenda seeks to step in and privatize and make money off of the housing sector, which is subsidized and provided to Libyan people at a cut rate. I think it's 10% of their income. They want to privatize a hospital. There's money to be made. Privatize electricity, water, these types of things which are free to Libyan people. They see a whole series of potential profit centers besides the oil, which everybody knows about. There's a whole series of potential profit makers, privatization, which would, of course, then increase class contradictions, then increase the povertization of Libya. I've been going to Libya since 1985, and I've never saw a homeless person ever in my travels throughout Libya since 1985. And in fact, when you drive throughout the western region in Tripoli, what you see is all these high-rise buildings, apartment buildings all over the place. I mean, it's like phenomenal. It reminds me of, United Arab Emirates. It reminds me of Sudan, where you see this constant construction of affordable apartments to move people into better housing than they have already. I didn't see no homelessness. Everybody's living, but they're getting increasing the quality of homes for the people of Libya.
Finally, Brother Kamathi, if all that you say about Colonel Gaddafi's relations with West Africa and what he's done for sub-Saharan Africa is true, why have no sub-Saharan African, West African, South African countries come to Libya's aid and defense?
Well, I think the AU has attempted, though been totally ignored. It's very, very racist how the AU has been ignored by the United Nations and NATO to broker a political solution as opposed to a military solution. They've been ignored, and the president of the AU, John Peng, has publicly criticized NATO and the United Nations for not including Africa on African Union as the driving force, the major force to negotiate a political solution, which the Jamali Brother Gaddafi said they're open to. That's what they're encouraging, a political solution. I think also, if you read this book, Confessions of an Economic Hitman by Perkins, they talk about how leadership in Africa, among other areas of the world, are threatened with death or big bonuses, millions of dollars of bonuses, if they follow the Western strategy for controlling neocolonial control of their governments, not only in Africa but in Latin America. So we don't have many African leaders who would willing to stand up and resist the dual tactics of Western imperialism, the threat of violence against them or their families, and turn their back on the millions of dollars and the bonuses that are offered if you roll with the program of imperialism. But one thing for sure, though, there have been popular demonstrations in Gabon, in Senegal, in Liberia, among other countries, in support of the Jamahiriya and Brother Gaddafi. There have been popular demonstrations that have not been reported by the Western media.
Dedon Kamathi is a former Southern California Black Panther Party member and a community activist who now hosts the program Freedom Now on Pacifica radio station KPFK in Los Angeles. He was a member of the Dignity Delegation led by former Green Party presidential candidate Cynthia McKinney, which returned from a 6-day fact-finding mission to Libya this week.